by. I don't get many visitors, and you've met some very famous people so far, and you will meet some more very famous, and I'm just a humble shoemaker. So I'm guessing you're more here about the story about the gangsters and prohibition on my old property. But we'll save that story for the end. To tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Peter Brower. The Browers are a long-standing family here in Wappingers Falls in southern Dutchess County. Been here many, many years. There are many Browers buried throughout this cemetery. I decided to come up here. I'm actually resting with my wife way about as far on the other side of the cemetery as you can get. But that's a little bit out of the way. So I decided to come up here where I'm a little closer to two of my sons, Richard Montgomery Brower and Martin Van Buren Brower. I believed in naming my children after local heroes. They both rest on the little hill right across the way. But like I said, my name is Peter Brower. I'm a shoemaker by trade. I was born in 1792, and I'm a third-generation Dutchess County resident. My great-grandfather, Nazareth Brower, was the first one to come into these parts. He immigrated from the what you call the Netherlands. He was Dutch in the early 1700s, settled in New Amsterdam, which I believe has a new name now. Came up in the early 1700s with his brother, a man by the name of Adolphus. And Adolphus, my great uncle, is the man responsible for building the wonderful Mesier Homestead. Built that in 1741. Now, there were some issues, and I know you've talked to some Mesiers already, but there were some issues between the two families, but that's long in the past. By my lifetime, everybody was getting along fairly well. Now, his son, my grandfather, Cornelius Brower, was a member of the 4th Regiment of New York Militia, Dutchess County Militia in the Revolutionary War, under Colonel Brinkerhoff. I'm very proud of my grandfather's service. His son Charles was my father, and he married a lady by the name of Elizabeth Hoffman, and that's where I came in. Now, as I said, there's nothing special about me. My family, my parents raised me to be a spiritual, hardworking, dedicated family man, and I tried to do that as best I could. I started becoming a shoemaker when I was very young and stayed in that profession for almost 70 years, my entire life. And I passed that along to some of my sons. My son Richard Montgomery, after the Civil War, he became my shoemaker in my shop. My other son, Martin Van Buren Brower, went down to New York City and was a shoemaker. One of the things, I've mentioned the Civil War a few times, but one of the things that was somewhat funny is the Browers my family was a little bit unique right before the Civil War in that we were Democrats. And Democrats had a reputation of maybe not being the friendliest toward war with the South, wanting to be a little bit more accommodating. So my family got the reputation as being what they called Copperheads, pro-Southern, Northern Democrats. Now, I thought that was balderdash. I thought that was ridiculous because I mentioned I had 5 sons. All 5 of them served in the Union Army. I had a beautiful daughter, and her husband served in the Union Army. 2 of my grandsons served in the Union Army. I had 8 members of my family serve, and they all came back. A couple of them made it through some very, very difficult battles. I've mentioned my children, Richard and Martin Van Buren. Richard Montgomery fought in the 4th New York Infantry and fought in such battles as Antietam and Chancellorsville. Martin Van Buren Brower, my son, rose to the rank of major in the 57th New York Infantry and was recognized in dispatches for bravery at Antietam. And funny enough, even though they were from 2 completely different units and 2 completely different Army Corps, they found themselves both fighting together at a place called the Sunken Road, just a few hundred yards from one another during that battle. Martin Van Buren Brower continued to fight in the Civil War through Gettysburg, Wilderness, Spotsylvania, wounded outside of Petersburg, but he made it through to become a shoemaker here in New York City. Later in his life, he moved up to Dutchess County and became a socialist, which there might be some Copperhead feeling in our family, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, my life was a happy one. I died in 1872, just a little over a year after my dear wife did. We had over 50 years together. Now, as I mentioned, I was born here in Dutchess County, and the Brouwers owned a lot of land here. Where we are standing on, this used to be Brouwer land, all the way down to New Hamburg. And about halfway between here and there on the banks of the Wappingers Creek was a little house that I was born in, where I grew up in, and where I lived most of my life. Now, after I passed away, the house was still there. It's no longer there. It's now a park on whatever that road is that takes you down to New Hamburg now. But that gets us to our story about Prohibition. Because it seems that in the late 1920s, Dutchess County became a hotbed for bootleggers. And a gentleman happened to buy my old farmstead. His name was Salvatore Maranzano. Some of you know who that gentleman is. I guess he's a fairly known gangster from down in New York City. One of the founders of, what do they call, the Five Families? Well, there's no recorded evidence that he ever lived in my old house. But for about 5 years, that was his property that he ran some of his business out of. And while nothing has ever been proven, we do know that a number of bodies have been found throughout southern Dutchess County from that era of time. And there are rumors that Mr. Maranzano might have been using our property for some disposal of his own. We can't prove it, but that's what I hear. He was killed down in the city in 1931 by a gentleman named Lucky Luciano, another one of those famous gangsters. And after that, the property fell into disrepair. But I know it's still there. And as a park, it's still being enjoyed by people around the area, as it should be. Again, my story is not as fancy as some of those you will hear, but I do appreciate you taking the time out and come talking to me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy meeting some of my good friends along the way. Thank you.